we're seeing a complete transformation within the Middle East, but it's also going to have huge effects on how countries even outside of the Middle East have to relate to the area. Because, for example, one of the most misleading and I would say insidious terms in modern politics is the Mid-East conflict. The Middle East conflict, to refer to the very small conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. Well, peace in the Middle East. We have to make peace in the Middle East to mean an agreement typically involving Israeli concessions between Israel and the Palestinians. Now, of course, that phrase is so deceptive because it focuses on a tiny conflict, one which was actually amongst the least violent in the Middle East, and conflates it with the entire region, which, of course, is racked by conflict. The Syrian civil war, the Lebanese civil war, Yemen, which are much more profound, and because now we actually have peace in the Middle East. That is to say, a broad peace across numerous countries, numerous Arab countries, with Israel. But that's going to be a challenge to those people who I think used the words Middle East peace process or peace in the Middle East, because there was a reason that phrase was used to really refer to Israel of all of the Middle East, because the international community has, let's say, an extraordinary, almost obsessive interest with Israel and its diplomatic relations. And it's hard to justify such an interest based simply on the size of the country, the importance of the scale, the number of lives lost in the conflict. So there was an attempt to tie Israel, well, Israel's problems, the problems Israel creates, because Israel doesn't have peace. That's why the Middle East as a whole is problematic, and I think that was an implicit way of rationalizing Europe's, for example, fairly unhealthy level of concern with what Israel does. Now we actually get what they said they were looking for: peace in the Middle East, and we'll find out who was actually interested in peace in the Middle East, which is what we're getting now, and who was interested more concretely in Israeli concessions towards the Palestinian Authority, which is a separate question.
Certainly, when you compare the conflict with the Palestinians to others in the Middle East, it does seem rather small and not as bloody as you mentioned. I wonder, though, if you have the same view that these deals with the UAE and Bahrain might actually bring about a pathway to move forward for Israel with the Palestinians?
By themselves, I think they will not, simply because the current Palestinian leadership, I don't think, is in a position psychologically, in terms of their self-interest, to make that deal. That's not how they think. It would require, certainly, the loss of Arab support for their cause is going to make them ask hard questions about how to continue. One answer could be to tone down their positions and make a deal like the Trump peace vision. I don't think that's going to be a boss's answer, because we've seen that when they've been confronted with diplomatic difficulties in the past, what they are always going to prefer is the outside option, the international, turning to international courts, turning to international tribunals. And they may think they're losing the Arab states. They're likely to make a play. They're likely to double down on what they're going to want from Europe, from the ICC. These they see as their ace in the hole, because there's a rhetoric of international law which is almost uniformly condemnatory to Israel, and I think in part it's these international law arguments that, like, every Israeli across the Green Line is illegal, Israel's presence is completely illegal, every single settler has to leave, is what has made the Palestinians unable to compromise, because it has given them a wrong, in my view, wrong, but a view of what their entitlements are. And once you believe you're entitled to something, it's very hard to settle for less.